Hello and welcome to the Cardboard Box Item podcast. This is a change from our regularly scheduled programming. We are doing something slightly different today. Normally we do From the Top, which is our Metacritic countdown series, which you can find on Spotify and our YouTube channel. It's called From the Top, just a little plug before we go any further. But today we're looking at something special. We are going to do a horror remake showdown between two titans of the genre, which are being remade very soon. Silent Hill 2 and Resident Evil 4. Two classics of the genre that are weirdly being remade around the same time. We might also touch on Dead Space, which is another horror classic, which is being remade currently, and remakes in general, really. I'm Michael, and I'm here with Sean and Steve. And yeah, guys, Silent Hill 2.
Big game.
Big game.
It is a big game.
So just a bit of info on that. Originally came out in 2001, developed by Team Silent, published by Konami. And like, correct me if I'm wrong about the original release, Steve, but Silent Hill came out and got a pretty good reception, sold pretty well, but Silent Hill 2 was like the major release, and it's sort of been seen as like a classic, maybe possibly the high watermark of like a psychological horror game, really.
Why, Michael, what would I know about Silent Hill? Why are you asking me?
Your name's literally Hill.
And therefore I know why. No, you're absolutely right. Like Silent Hill, the first one, was kind of considered the first kind of real contender to Resident Evil, which was the granddaddy of survival horror. The first survival horror game ever made, obviously being Resident Evil 4. That's callback. But no, Silent Hill 2, when that came out, that was the one that really grab people's attentions by the balls, so to speak, where they kind of realize, quite literally, by the balls. And it's where they kind of realized the way you tell stories. I think it's kind of one of those games that people always talk about when they're talking about the unique way you can tell stories with interactive media. Because Silent Hill 2, there's so many elements in that game that just simply wouldn't work in like a movie or a book or a app, whatever. I'm trying to think of a third one that people don't usually say, but it's a badass game, and I am going to just rant and rave about it for ages. So someone else talk for a while.
Yeah, it's like for those of joining us for the first time, we on our YouTube channel have a Silent Hill countdown. So Steve wrote these video essays, sort of, analysing all the Silent Hill games and sort of ranking them in a way. And so, like, Steve's a massive Silent Hill fan. We're all sort of fans of the genre as well in one way or another. Me, probably least so, because I'm a big scaredy pants. But I definitely love a lot of what it's doing, and I love reading about and watching these games. So just a bit of info on the remake itself. Developed by Bloober Team, which have the worst name ever. We should get that out of the way. So they know the genre well. We're probably going to talk about them a little bit, and maybe not all of it will be positive, but just to lay out that they are familiar with the genre. They've made games like The Medium, Layers of Fear, Observer, and The Blair Witch Project, which is meant to be horrible. But I've heard, varying things about, especially Observer and Layers of Fear have a lot of fans. And The Medium is a game that probably owes a lot to the Silent Hill games in general.
Yeah, I don't think that did too well.
No, I've heard it described by people as just like a walking sim, sort of, with some scary bits, to be honest.
Yeah.
But saying that they are remaking a classic here, so they do have a good framework to begin with. But this has been rumoured for a long time that Bloober Team will be involved in this, and fans have not been ecstatic about that fact.
The thing is, right, with Bloober Team, while I was doing my research, I was looking at the website Wikipedia. And I know, deep diving, obviously. Yeah, right. But if you look at the games that they were producing pretty much since Layers of Fear, it's funny, they had like a mix of genres before Layers of Fear, but everything since is just psychological horror, psychological horror, psychological horror, psychological horror. And it seems to me like this is something that they've been building to from the very beginning. Like everything they did was kind of something to add to their CV, just so they could say, guys, give us this game. Like it strikes me as like they're like fans of it, but I would hesitate to say that's a good thing. Like they seem like not the good kind of fans, the kind of fans that want to put Pyramid Head like front and center as like the poster boy, and like, you know, maybe they'll delve into the backstory of Pyramid Head. How did he get a pyramid on his head? That kind of thing.
Oh God, I can just imagine like a flashback to his childhood, and he's drawing a little cartoon, and it's all these pyramids, and like then his mother dies, and he's obsessed with pyramids. She dies in Egypt for some reason. Yeah, no, we don't. That's actually a really interesting point, is how much story-wise they're going to flesh out and change things. I would presume, hopefully not too much, because it's such a revered story, and the thematic presentation is like probably industry best in Silent Hill 2. I'd probably see more gameplay changes from them, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's a hard one to call with Silent Hill 2, because the rich part of Silent Hill 2, the thing that's really worth talking about, is its story. And a lot of the gameplay elements, like, they complement it, but like it's not really what you're there for. No one's going into Silent Hill 2 because like, oh man, the tank controls are like unbelievable. The swinging mechanics of like your 2x4 when you're hitting nurses just feels so good. Like no one's there for that. But the weird thing is, that complements the story. So I think the only thing they can develop without hurting the legacy of the game is the story. But that raises its own problems. Like, you know, how are they going to do that? If they're going to do like a blow-by-blow remake, they would want to be very, very careful with the things they do expand. They have to expand on something to justify it, but like they have to be really careful with, or they have to go in like swinging, go absolutely mad. And if they're going to do that, I think they want to take like the Final Fantasy VII remake route, like really go like off the wall, like crazy with it. Like, in my opinion,
I don't think they'll do that. I don't think they've,
No.
like, I don't know what other way to put it. I don't think they've the balls to do it. Or maybe
No.
Konami might have them on too much of a leash to let them down that road. But for those that don't know, the Final Fantasy VII remake, it did hit all the plot points for that section of the game that were in the original, but they expanded on it and sort of explored the fact that it is a remake. So they had characters within the game that knew they were retreading old ground, and there was sort of a meta commentary around fan expectation in that, and it was a really interesting part of that game. I had mixed feelings on it at the time, but it's fascinating, and it sort of justifies its existence as a remake. It's not just retreading old ground.
Well, I think that brings up like an interesting point just about remakes. And if I'm going on a tangent, stop me here. But
Do it.
like,
Stop.
like, there seems to be like, you know, remakes can go down one route, which is just like remake the game exactly as it was, just like update the graphics and the gameplay a little bit. Then reboot, where like you're remaking the game, but it's almost like a fresh start. So we're gonna like call back to a lot of the story points and stuff, but take it in a different direction, maybe also. And like Steve, you being such a huge fan of the game, would you rather they stay true to the original, or would you prefer them to expand?
I would honestly be happy with either way, so long as they did a good job. Like that is like my honest to God answer. Like if they're gonna stay, like play it safe, I'm like, play it proper safe. Just bring it to modern audiences, like, and make it run better. That's fine. That's pretty much all I need.
Yeah.
But if you're going to expand, go in swinging. Like really, really go for it. Like don't be like really half-arsing it, and for the love of Christ, don't fanboy it, because that would be the worst thing they could possibly do. And if I have any doubts about any fears I have about Bloober Team, it is that they're going to be really fanboyish about it. That's like my key concern.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, like, just before we go any further, have you guys played any of like Bloober Team's other games?
I've played a bit of Layers of Fear, which I really enjoyed, to be honest. I haven't like got hugely far in it or anything, but I thought like its presentation and everything was really good. Although I do hear there's like mixed feelings about that game as well, apparently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was. It's funny. Before I even knew we were going to do this podcast, I was looking through like sales stuff on PlayStation Store, and I saw Observer, and I was like, that looks sort of interesting. Like I might try it. But then the ad for the game put me off, which is odd. But it was because the ad for the game was like an updated version that was like, oh, 4 more puzzle rooms to puzzle out, and I'm sort of like, this seems like more of a, I don't know, Five Nights at Freddy's sort of thing than anything else. Like
I remember when that was being released, and I thought it was really cool looking, and it's from the guys that made Layers of Fear. Then like when it came out, it didn't really like hit that well, I don't think. Like there wasn't much chat about it after
it
release.
does have its fans, I have to say. Some people really do rate it. And I think, especially in comparison to the medium, I think Layers of Fear and Observer were their high critical, points. But like, I guess just talking around the nuances of the genre, Layers of Fear and Observer are more the first person, almost like Amnesia-esque games. Definitely, they owe a lot to that game. Whereas the medium brought it to third person, and they're going to stay in third person for the Silent Hill 2 remake, obviously. But one interesting thing to note is that they've confirmed that they will be changing the camera. So it's going to be an over-the-shoulder camera. That, I think, obviously we're talking early days and we haven't seen too much gameplay yet. We've only seen this first trailer. But for me, that's an interesting way to modernize something. And they've talked about revising the combat system. And obviously there's, like Steve said, pros and cons to that. But the camera work in the original was really important. It was something that, like Steve touched on, it worked into the themes of the game. There was a reason things were framed a certain way. If you lose that with just like the camera's always over James's shoulder, it sort of it becomes like any other third-person survival horror game. It sort of loses something, and that. But like maybe modern audiences won't work that way. They don't want to use tank controls. They don't want to, have something fiddly like that. But what you lose is those like interesting like Dutch angles, the interesting way the camera moves around, the way it obscures things that could be around the corner. I'm really worried that like that'll be lost in translation.
It does seem to be the way to go at the moment. Like the third person, like over the shoulder view is like the way to go for, because even with Resident Evil Village, apparently like one of the biggest complaints people had when that came out, even though it's an amazing game in first person, was that it wasn't in third person because people were so used to the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes being in third person. And that's why they brought out just today, I think, or yesterday, they dropped the like expansion that had includes a third person mode for the entire campaign. And to be fair, it looks kind of cool and stuff, but I didn't mind the first person. And I think, anyway, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. But
no, that's an interesting point because it's so funny. Like 10 years ago when PT came out and Amnesia and all these other...
They were all first person.
And that seemed, that was the trend in horror games, like really immerse you in the experience, get you like up close and personal and really like ratchet up the fear. But we are seeing a swing back towards third person. And the other remakes, RE4 and Dead Space, are third person over the shoulder.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were originally third person as well. But I think it really changes the feel of the game for me.
100%.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like when I look back at playing Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space and stuff, those were, I would call them survival horrors, but there was a big focus on shooting in those games.
Action survival horror, yeah.
And like, okay, you say, you would think like, well, wouldn't first person be better for shooting? Because like first person shooters are a huge like subgenre.
First person shooters? Never heard of them.
Well, look them up sometime, man. Fucking Modern Warfare. Yeah. But strangely though, when it comes to like a horror game, I think first person is way more like immersive it scares you more in a first person.
The beginning of Resident Evil 7 speaks to that as well, yeah.
Yeah.
And like
one of the best openings of any game ever, like.
and like Amnesia and Outlast and stuff, even though like shooting isn't a focus on. But even like in in Resident Evil 7 and 8, like shooting is a big focus on in the game mechanics, but I don't know, it feels like there's less focus on it in a way. I don't know how to explain it.
It's
but
not like Doom. It's
yeah,
you're more
100%
under
it's not.
pressure.
Yeah, you're more under pressure, but like, yeah, I don't know.
But I think you've put your finger on it right there now, because using the word pressure. But you see, the thing is, right, it's very easy to confuse horror with intensity. Because
very
like,
true, yeah.
with first person horrors, yeah, you're never going to get more intense experiences if you're in first person. But I wouldn't necessarily say that automatically equals a better horror game, because if you get the atmosphere right, it's not going to be that level of intense. Your heart's not going to be racing nonstop, but you can still get a much better horror experience based on just like, again, camera angles, music, and like framing,
100%.
all that kind of stuff. Like, I do 100% agree. Like, some of the most intense horror games imaginable have been in first person, but I do often prefer like the third person ones.
Yeah, no,
And
like,
that's not. And sorry, and that's not because like I'm a big scaredy pants like Michael over here.
I'll put my hands up.
yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Steve. Like, you know, two of my top favorite games in the genre are Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space. So, and Evil Within, of course, but we'll leave that to the side. Yeah, and like, I don't think I wouldn't like to play those games in first person. I'd say I prefer like the third person like angle for those. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. I think like you can have a really like scary horror experience in both.
But it's worth noting that, and it's something Steve touched upon there, like Silent Hill 2, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, because you're our resident expert, it isn't quite an intense it isn't quite an intense experience. It's more that dread, that creeping atmosphere, that sort of that thing that doesn't exactly get your heart racing, but that unsettles you more than anything.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, as like a self-proclaimed horror fan, like there is a lot to be said for like horror that is just enjoyable to watch versus horror that is too intense to really enjoy. Like, it's the difference between watching The Shining and a Serbian film. You know, like one film is like legitimately like a well-made film that's like, you know, dripping in atmosphere, and like, you know, that doesn't really have that many really intense moments, but it's still one of the greatest horror movies ever made, versus a Serbian film, which is super intense and no one would ever really want to watch it. You know, getting that balance right is really important.
I'm dreading having to put some clips from a Serbian film.
I haven't
Please
seen it.
don't. I refuse to watch it.
It's really fucked.
I'm never going to watch it. And that's from me. I've watched The Human Centipede, but I will never watch a Serbian film. It's sounds too disgusting.
So just to go and touch on the trailer itself, if that's okay, guys. We only have this trailer and a bit of info to work on at the moment. The trailer's really interesting, and it gives us some points that we can definitely talk around. But the first thing I wanted to say, and I want to ask you, Steve, specifically, it starts with a floor level shot of a cockroach.
Oh, you've picked up on this as well, and I'm delighted you did.
Yeah.
It's a great big middle finger to Hideo Kojima.
Do you think I presume the intent was a little like loving reference to PT, and because for those who don't know, I think PT starts with the same shot.
It basically does. Like, I mean, obviously slightly different, but I can't help but take it as anything but like a middle finger. Like, it might, the intent might be different. It might be like, oh, PT was such a great thing, and like we're taking influence of that. But for me, all I could see was like, hey, remember that thing that we cancelled and you're never going to get again? Well, here's the next best thing, which a lot of people are feeling very iffy about and aren't convinced is going to be great. Like, it's very hard to read that as anything but, you know, fuck you, PT fans.
Yeah, that's true.
Personally.
Yeah, I can see that as well. It was a brave way to start the trailer. Anyway, I'll say that for him. But then it moves into one of the beginning of Silent Hill 2 and one of the most iconic images from it, which is James in this like dilapidated, grimy toilet, looking into the mirror and sort of being faced with himself. There's been a lot of discussion about James and the way his character model works. So yeah, let's just dive into that for a minute. So just to give people some context, the original game came out in 2001, so the early days of the PS2. And it's still a pretty good-looking game, especially being from that era. Like, it was one of the best-looking games that probably came out around that time. It was during Konami's, like, golden era when, like, they were making stuff like Metal Gear Solid 2 and they were really pushing the envelope in terms of graphical fidelity. But saying that, the faces are pretty unexpressive in a lot of ways, especially in comparison with games today. And the remake has a fully mocapped, expressive face. Some fans aren't too happy about this because they feel it like, especially in comparison with the original, it seems like he's overacting and he's too expressive. What are your thoughts on it, guys?
I mean, I'm just going to throw this over to Resident Evil because I haven't played the first one at all, or the original, so I can't really say much on it. Yeah, Steve.
Okay, that's fair enough. When I first saw it, I hated it. I really hated it. I thought it looked terrible. And I've almost swung completely in the other direction since then. I actually really like the character model. The acting is a bit, I'm not sure. Like, I don't hate it. I need to see the whole thing to get the context. So, like, I'm withholding judgment on that. But just the character model itself, I'm actually quite on board with. I think they've done really good work with the way he looks because, again, with the previous James Sunderland, he's so blank and expressive that I'm kind of like, whatever. I never really thought about him as a character, really. Like, he was just a cipher for the game. This one, it's sort of similar, but it gets me thinking about questions I would like to be thinking about in a remake. Like, specifically, I looked at it and it immediately got me thinking, I can't picture him as having friends at all. Like, I'm looking at him and I just think, like, I can't see him, like, chatting idly with anybody. And I'm like, that works really well. And especially, and I realize now we should have said spoilers at the start of this podcast. Spoilers for Resident Evil 4 and Silent Hill 2. They're very old games, so, like, whatever.
Go play them.
Yeah, basically. If you don't want spoilers, go play them now. But
pause the podcast, complete both of these games, come back, pick up from this point. Thank you.
And now. Yeah, but, like, so in the original, like, James Sunderland, he just seems like this all-around nice guy, but he has a dark past. And I feel like that's actually communicated quite well in his character model here, because he kind of looks a little bit pathetic, but also, like, he's got an air of, like, he might have something going on underneath the surface. And I like that. Okay,
cool. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And I guess as well, we have to acknowledge that, like, we've seen very little of it, so we have to see what it's like in context. And a change like this, you know, they really couldn't have done as blank and expressionless a face as was in the original. Like, that wouldn't it would look weird. Like, it would look so unusual with the high fidelity of everything else going on. But one point I'll make is, I watched a video that compared both games side by side, and seeing the original, there's something something really unsettling about his expression in that scene. The blankness actually works to the game's favor in terms of the theme and the atmosphere in general. Just seeing this person, and you can't read his face at that point. It's the beginning of the game. He's looking in the mirror, and you don't know if it's apathy or horror or trauma or whatever on his face. It's sort of like it's this thing that comes up with older games where we sort of project our own feelings onto somewhat like simple graphics, etc., like we used to do with 8-bit games. That's definitely going to get lost. Maybe it's something that's unavoidable. Like we're saying, like, you can't exist in the same world as The Last of Us or something like that and not have mo-capped expression-filled, character models. But it goes into something that might be a little more detrimental in that, are they going to be more explicit with some of the more mystified elements of the original game? Are they going to over-explain some things, which I would worry about? And that goes hand in hand with the expressions of James. It's like, the imagery is so strong in the original that sometimes it doesn't need that emotional connection. But saying that, maybe it'll work. This thing has to stand on its own 2 feet.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you there. Like the one thing I will say, just to add on to that, is if they're going to make this big of a change, like then again, it's something that they have to really lean into. Like, so if you're revisiting, like if you're a person like me, and I imagine most of the people playing these games are going to be people like me who have played the original, you need kind of a good reason to revisit it. Like it's in some ways it's nice to just replay an original that's the exact same. Like the Medieval remake was a great example of that. It was the exact same game, only prettier, and that was fine. But if you're going to like bring a game like this back in, like and you're going to change this much, then like I'm okay with them changing certain things, because it doesn't change the fact that the original still exists. You know, I mean, take wild swings, go for it, see what lands, and I think they could pull it off potentially. Now I'm kind of, I can't even say that I'm cautiously like optimistic. I'm very 50-50 on it, because they've made other decisions that I'm not a fan of.
Okay, well, let's keep going through the trailer and we'll touch on those. So one thing I wanted to bring up quickly, and this is such a like minor nerdy nitpick, but I'll see if you guys agree. But they showed as the trailer goes on, they show some footage of James walking through the town, and for me, the fog looks too light. And that's such a pedantic thing to say, but it's such an important visual characteristic of these games. Obviously, it was sort of a technical necessity in the first game that sort of serendipitously made it more atmospheric. But in Silent Hill 2, the original, the fog is so oppressive and just like a blank white screen in front of you where you can't see anything beyond. It's like unnaturally foggy. Whereas in this remake, it still like obscures a lot of things, but it seems to, and again, they sort of had to make it more realistic, but in a way it seems too light. It seems like you can see a bit further than you could before.
Do you think part of the reason, though, it was so heavy in the original was because of the limitations?
Oh, no doubt.
It was.
No doubt, but it almost doesn't matter what their intention or need
true.
for it was. It still existed that way, and it was very, like, it was so terrifying to go through those streets. Like, that, for me, was one of the most intense parts of it, because you didn't know what was around the corner. And, like, it's so easy to get lost as well. So part of me worries that, they're like rounding the edges of the original.
And yeah, when you're saying that, like what I was saying, like the decisions I didn't appreciate, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Because not so much that it's so light, but and this is just as like shallow and pedantic, but it still got to me, is the fog looks too busy, if that makes sense. Like there's lots of shots of it just being like windy and there's like leaves blowing through it, and like it just looks like, it just doesn't look like a place you want to be. And I know that sounds really, really stupid when I'm talking about Silent Hill, but you see, the difference is in Silent Hill 2, there was, and this is going to be very like me being fanboyish, there was a beauty to it. Like Silent Hill 2 looked beautiful when it was shrouded in fog. This doesn't look pretty. It looks ugly. And I'm not a fan of that. So yeah, that's an issue that I have with.
That's an interesting point, actually, just ramping up. It's something I almost feel came up a little bit with the Demon Souls remake, in that they sort of, that was a very respectful remake in a lot of ways, but they leaned into some of the more grotesque imagery, and whereas like Miyazaki's famous for making his character, or asking his character artists to make the monsters look dignified, and you know, not to lean into the simple grotesque stuff just for shock value, whereas they could be potentially doing that because that's the expectation with horror games nowadays. But yeah, things are going to change. We have to recognize that.
I feel like, sorry, do you want to continue going through the trailer? Is there...
No, we've sort of touched on the major things. It does various different shots. We see Pyramid Head. I don't hate his design, to be honest. I think it works, but if anyone disagrees...
I need context. Like, this is the thing. Like, I've never liked Pyramid Head in any media other than the original game. Like, I hated the way he looked in the movie. I hated the way he looked in Homecoming. In this one, it's probably the best of all of those, but I don't know. I just hated that sting at the end of the trailer. It's like, oh,
Oh, well, we'll still talk about Silent Hill 2, but let's move on to Resident Evil 4. So, again, a classic of the genre, but very much in a different sort of lane of survival horror. This was a game developed, again, in-house at Capcom back in 2005, I think. And it's sort of, for those who don't know, the original sort of revamped the genre in some ways. It moved to a more action focus while keeping some of the survival horror elements that the series was known for. It popularized the over-the-shoulder view, which we've talked about, and this one will continue on. And was sort of a sea change for the genre and breathed new life into the Resident Evil franchise. This remake is being developed by the same team that did the RE2 remake, so it's probably going to be similar in some ways, their approach. It's coming out March 2023, and yeah, I'd say they're probably going to look at it the same way they did the RE2 remake. They're going to take a lot of the beats from the original, but sort of update them. We can already see a bit of that from the trailer. But what were your guys' initial thoughts when you watched the gameplay of this?
Yeah, so like I think you're right in what you're saying. It's definitely going to kind of follow 2 and 3 in terms of the remake treatment it's going to get. It definitely seems like they're staying very true to the original with this one. Just kind of like update, because this one, like 2 and 3 were originally tank control, so they obviously changed them to over the shoulder, changed the gameplay mechanics a little bit and stuff. Whereas with 4, we're almost coming back to, okay, so this is where we started with our over the shoulder.
Yeah.
So all we need to really do is update the graphics, maybe make the gameplay a little bit smoother and stuff. But having like watched the trailer and stuff, it seems like very true to the original, even in like Leon's movements and his like the way he jumps over stuff and kicks and stuff like that.
I was delighted to see you can still do the roundhouse kick. And
yeah.
that sort of mechanic is staying in this remake.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it's weird. Like I'm kind of talking about it now. Like I am excited for it to come out, but I don't know. This goes into just like more talking about the remake culture more in general. But like there's certain games I feel like I knew this was coming. It almost felt like 2 and 3 were kind of like the build up to let's get 4 out there because that's everybody's favorite. And you know, like. Yeah, I'll come back to like remake. Well, no, but it's like it is probably seen as like you know the one people gravitate towards most. But I'll come back to like my thoughts on the remake culture. I think it's looking really good. I think it's going to sell very well. And yeah, I just I don't have like too much more to say on it. I think it looks like it'll be a really good remake in the same vein as 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. One thing in particular, I agree with you. This is definitely going to sell well. Like, this is probably the safest bet that Capcom possibly could have made on anything. Like, I feel kind of two ways about it. Like, see, the thing is, you're saying like Resident Evil 4 is like everyone's favorite remake. It actually wasn't mine. Like, I like it, but I always preferred like the really grungy. You know, first original trilogy, especially 2, as opposed to 4, which really well balanced, like, you know, scary and cheesy at the same time. Now, I really like the aesthetic they're going for. Like, it kind of reflects a lot of what I really liked about Resident Evil 7. I'm very down with that. The thing is, like, a lot of the things that made Resident Evil 4 particularly special, they're kind of just, they're either A, just regurgitating them, or B, I have a feeling there's not going to be in it at all. Like, the cheesiness is going to be gone, and I'm kind of a little bit upset about that, because even though I didn't like it at the time, in hindsight, I really do like it. Like, one of my favorite lines from like the very end of the game, it's like, oh, what was it? Ashley, like the president's daughter, says to Leon, it's like, after you take me home, why don't we do a little bit of overtime? And I'm like, there's no way in hell they're going to have that line in this game. Not a chance. chance. Like,
I have heard though that I think you're about to say the same thing, Michael, that they're keeping in a lot of Leon's one-liners and stuff, like the things that made like the funny lines he had. I don't know if all of them have been there, like that overtime line, but I know they're keeping a lot.
They are, yeah, you're completely right. In the trailer, the part where he shoots an oil lamp down onto the cow in the barn, he says, bill me for the repairs later. So,
Yeah.
like, I think they will keep a certain element of that, and I would hate if they lost it, because I think it really works in the Resident Evil universe. They can get away with that cheesiness a bit more. Like, that sort of stuff would not fly in Silent Hill. Like, it's
No.
way too serious.
yeah.
But if they probably won't have that line, I'd say, at the end.
Maybe not.
I think they'll, again, round the edges off a bit more than in the original, but I hope they keep the goofiness to a certain extent. They'll have to, because when you get to the castle and you have that weird short guy and all the henchmen and all, that stuff is just inherently funny, you
Yeah.
know?
But
I know what you're
the
saying
way-
though. Sorry, I know what you're saying, Steve. It does like definitely look a lot grungier and stuff, like the vibe of the scenery and everything. But sorry, continue what you were saying.
It just, like, it seems to me like that if they do have that stuff, like, it's going to contrast like a lot harder, and like and that might work maybe, but like I'd be surprised if it did. Even that thing like with your man in the castle, like there's a brief bit of footage I think of him, and even he looks like he's less so like a kind of midget, and more of a like I'm a deformed like creature kind of thing, and like it seems less inherently funny as he was in the original. Like it just I'm not actually against that, because this is the style of game that I would prefer, but I just feel like, and I'm fine with it. I think it's kind of unnecessary, but I still think it's going to be a good game at the end of the day. It might not be like momentous or anything, and I don't think it merited a remake as much as like Silent Hill 2 did.
Yeah,
But,
that's what I want to.
yeah, but like in the end of the day, it's still probably going to be a pretty decent game, you know?
Yeah, no, and you both hit on it. Like, it's, as we're going through these, we're getting to games that came out more recently, and like Sean alluded to, the mechanics aren't going to change
Massive.
that much in this game. So it sort of begs the question, why bother, other than it's a license to print money?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different ways you can look at it. Like, just as I was thinking about it in my head there, like one thing that does make sense is, especially with older games from like Silent Hill and games in the 90s that have been remade, it's introducing them to a new audience of like younger generations who probably aren't bothered going back and playing those games.
But go back and play them, guys. They're okay.
Yeah, I know, but this is just an easier way to appeal to and like when you have a game from like a few decades ago that has a killer story, and it's like it was a brilliant game at the time, but people are just like swamped with like next gen games now, and they just don't want to go back and play them. Here, let's just update it, and we know it'll sell well because it was amazing back then. People will buy it.
Yeah.
So there's that argument, but then the other side is, I mean, this like they're remaking games like Dead Space is one of them. Didn't come out that long ago. Still holds up really well today. Why does that need a remake? You know, and then
The Last of Us.
Fucking
The Last of Us, that was the most unnecessary remake ever.
Man. Yeah, no, that was absolutely ridiculous. But like, I think we're just getting into the talking point about remake culture, and like why is there such a push for that nowadays? And I think like I'm not totally against it. Like I said, I am excited to play Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space, but why is there such a push on that? Like, when, you know, could you put those resources towards a new game in the series, or like just a new IP altogether, you know, alongside having the remakes? But it seems lately, like Modern Warfare just came out. Now that's more of a reboot, but it's still like, it hits some of the story points of the original and stuff, and same goes for like Modern Warfare 1 that came out a couple of years ago. And like, I don't know, they like I feel like publishers are just going back to what sold well a decade ago. Let's just do that again, you know?
Yeah, it is. It's depressing in a way. For like, in one hand, I'm sort of like ambivalent, because I'm sort of like, well, do you know, Shadow of the Colossus had that remake on PS4 and it looks amazing. The original still exists. I can enjoy both of them. They didn't change it up too much, so I can get like a version with like shinier graphics on it. That looks great. I have the best of both worlds. But you've sort of hit on the thing of, that's resources that aren't going into an original idea then.
Yeah.
And it means we're regurgitating and there's less new stuff out there.
I also think just like, say some games merit a remake possibly because, okay, if you want to say, oh, we couldn't like realize our vision for the game fully at the time when because of technology and stuff. But then there's also a thing like, this game was amazing when it came out, and it's like a piece of art from that time. Like let's leave it be, like
Yes,
almost. If you want to experience it, go back and play it, like you're saying, Steve. There's no need to like release it again. You're kind of changing its legacy in a way. And I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but like
No, you're right.
when people look back at. Like, just take when people look back at Resident Evil 4, going like, oh, which one are you talking about? Kind of thing. It's like the fucking original, man. Like that was
the OG.
Yeah, but
Like if they still do that, like if they keep those games available, then like it's no problem. Because like you, Sean, like I love a remake every now and then. It gives me an excuse to go back to a game that I like, if I like it, and just like say, I can enjoy it all over again and enjoy its like little nuances. The kind of fear I have is that it's going to do the same thing that like the GTA trilogy did, like where they literally replace it completely.
Yeah.
And like now, don't get me wrong, like a lot of those like GTA 3 and I don't know about the others because I didn't really see him that much, but like that looks like it could use an update. It's just a shame that the new one that they had kind of fucked up a lot of it. Like, so that's an issue. I feel personally, right, that hot take, right? I think that remakes of games past the PS2 era, and even PS2 is a bit of a stretch, are never going to generate that much excitement, just because from the PS2 onwards, the graphics didn't really improve that much. Like, PS3, it's you can't really get excited about something that doesn't look that noticeably different. Like even PS2, I was never as excited about, the Shadow of the Colossus remake or this, or even like Silent Hill 2, not as much. If they had announced that they were remaking Silent Hill 1, I would have lost my mind. But Silent Hill 2, I'm just kind of like, okay, like they can only really get away with it if they're, as well as updating the graphics, they really take a wild swing at it. Like, so that's my take on it.
That's actually something I wanted to ask when we're talking about Silent Hill, Steve. Like, do you think they just skipped over 1 because 2 was the better seller anyway, or their most popular one? Do you expect if this sells well, they'll go back and redo 1?
No,
Really?
I think a lot of people now. I'm definitely in the minority here. Like I love the original Silent Hill, but a lot of people don't look back on it that favorably, just because 2 was such a massive leap. Like, and everybody talks about it, everybody loves it, and it just doesn't compare very well, unfortunately.
Right.
I just loved the first game when it came out. I love it to bits, but I can't. I'd love it if they did, but I can't see them doing it, to be honest. Like, if it is done, it'll be done by another team, I expect. I can't see Bloober Team going into that again. And to be honest, I wouldn't really want them to do it either.
They'd probably do 3 before they'd do 2, potentially. 3's got a lot of fans.
Yeah, I doubt they will, though. Honestly, I think they're going to do Silent Hill 2, and Shot in the Dark, I don't think it's going to do great, and I think that'll just be it. It'll be a one-off.
Fair enough.
Yeah, fair.
Actually, I was thinking as well, and I saw some people kind of talking about it. Where does Capcom go after this with Resident Evil? And because 5 and 6 aren't really liked as much, because they were very much more action focused.
Code Veronica.
Yeah, I have heard that being thrown around all right, that might get one, but I think somebody from Capcom came out and said, well, at least at this time, they're not working on one, but maybe in the future. Yeah, who knows? Maybe they'll go back and do one
remake for
another remake. Yeah, but to be fair, the first I think the remake of 1 is really good. Like I'm kind of still in the middle of it, but that was for the GameCube. I think that was remade. Like, so that was still like nearly 20 years ago.
But the thing about that is, it still looks amazing. That's the high watermark for a game that hasn't aged well or badly.
Yeah,
I should say
it does. And the nice thing about that as well was that it was almost kind of textbook what a remake should be. Like they kept the tank controls and everything.
They expanded it in interesting ways rather than like destroying the legacy of the first one.
But you know, with the way they've done all these other remakes, they could go back and do a third person one on that. I think they probably will, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
Dead Aim or like
Dead
Stun
Aim
Survivor
was
or
sick.
something like that.
I fucking love Dead Aim. That was deadly, actually.
No, you know what they'll do? They'll remake 7 with an over-the-shoulder viewpoint.
Yeah.
It's mad to think though that they've nearly like redone almost their entire Resident Evil main library like at this stage.
I know.
Like that's just mad.
I was going to
crazy.
say it's probably got the record for a series with the most
remakes. Probably does, yeah.
Like full from the ground remakes, because
Yeah.
like 1, 2, 3 and 4 now will be fully remade, which is
Unless you include Zelda, which is essentially like a remake of itself again and again and again. Like so.
yeah, but we're not nerds, so we wouldn't do that. So just to move on before we start really ranking the pros and cons of both of these remakes against each other, I should say. We've touched on it, but we want to talk about Dead Space as well.
Yeah.
So originally came out in 2008,
Yeah,
I think
so.
So the most recent remake, we should mention, and the remake's being developed by Motive, which is an EA studio that previously worked on Star Wars games. And this is coming out pretty soon, January 2023. The thing that struck me most about this one is it was the one least in need of a remake, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Because it came out so recently, and maybe it's my nostalgia goggles, but I still think the original looks really good.
It does. No, 100%. I think it still really holds up. Big fan of Dead Space 1 and 2. 3 wasn't amazing. But yeah, they're still great games. Recommend, if you haven't played them, go back and play them. They're on Game Pass actually as well, if you have that. But I am kind of looking forward to the remake because what I've seen looks sick. They've changed a few little things in it though, I've noticed. Just certain timings of events and like layouts of rooms have changed ever so slightly, I think. No, I don't know if it's like major enough that it's going to change the feel of the game and stuff, but I don't know. It looks cool, but I really didn't. I was really surprised when I heard that was getting a remake. Didn't expect it at all. I think it's funny as well. I just want to mention that it's coming out like really close to. So the team that originally made Dead Space, Visceral, they were shut down by EA after making
Dead Space 3.
Dead Space 3,
or they moved on to helping with some other franchise or something like that.
I know they downscaled them like quite heavily, and then they canned them eventually. That was back when EA was having its huge layoffs across the board. But they actually, some members of that team anyway, went on to create their own studio called Striking Distance Studios, and they're bringing out the Callisto Protocol, which is almost a spiritual successor. Like if you go and watch a trailer of that, it just screams Dead Space. Like in the character movement, the camera angles, everything. And that's coming out like really close to the remake of Dead Space. So I just thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I'll probably get it, but and this comes back to what I'm saying about remake culture and how crazy it's gone. And like, I don't think it's a cash grab. I feel this one more than anything,
especially for something so recent, and it feels very unnecessary. Like you're saying, like it looks amazing. They're updating the graphics, but the original had all that. It had the atmosphere. It had the amazing sound design as well.
Yeah.
But
one other major thing they're changing is they're giving
Isaac,
thank you. They're giving him a voice in this one. He did have a voice in 2 and 3, and 2 was probably my favorite.
Yeah.
And I really liked the fact that he talked in 2 because it just like evolved the story and his character so much more. But going back and playing 1 after playing 2 and 3, like I didn't mind that he was mute. And I guess that was just my first engagement with Dead Space was, oh, here's Isaac, he's mute, whatever, So I don't know. I think it'll be cool that he talks in this, but it'll be interesting to see what he says and stuff because it's all brand new lines that weren't in the original.
There's a potential there to expand the central story, and again, spoilers for people who don't know, it turns out that your wife or your partner is dead at the end of it, and you've just been seeing visions
Yeah.
or of her throughout. So that
Lads, they
maybe-
really only have one playbook for these games, don't they?
yeah, it's constant thing. Yeah, dead wives. But like seeing that sort of thing explored with him being more active in the story may be interesting in some ways, but also part of me is like, God, it's in some ways sacrilegious. Maybe I shouldn't hold it up as a sacred cow, but I just think of if they went back to Half-Life and gave Gordon a voice in
Yeah.
that such an iconically silent character. How would I feel about that? But saying that, like we've mentioned it before, this Final Fantasy VII remake fully voiced the cast, and I was mostly really happy with that. I think most people really enjoyed what they brought to the game. But specifically, something we touched on is that's a game from 1997, from the PS1 era.
Yeah.
That's a place that's ripe for remake. Like, you can see the technological limitations of games from back then, especially something like Final Fantasy VII, that can really be expanded in a remake. Dead Space, the wireframe of this, without any of the graphics, seems very similar.
Yeah, I do wonder though, like I think if say Visceral were still around and they were to redo this, I feel like they'd probably do the same thing because they allowed him, or they gave him a voice rather in Dead Space 2 and showed his face and stuff, which I don't think was visible in 1, but I could be
I
wrong
think at the
about
very
that.
end of 1 you saw his
Yeah,
face.
they show him at the very end, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, like I think, and obviously I'm assuming that most people enjoyed his voice acting and stuff in 2, that they would probably do the same thing. So yeah, I don't know. It is changing a core thing in the game, but you know, maybe it's for the better. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
It's the one thing about that game that I kind of wish they hadn't changed, though, because I do not think the story of Dead Space was really that amazing. Like, it was a great horror game, but like the story was kind of like, I can predict a lot of this like as it's going along. I kind of wish they were just doing a more or less like typical remake. They seem to more or less have done that. The only issue I have is with the voice. They have one new system that they've built into it. I saw this on like a random video and no one seems to be talking about it, but I think it sounds really interesting. It's called the Intensity Director. Have you guys heard of this?
No, I
Yeah,
haven't.
so it's like an AI thing that'll like keep you on your toes. If you're in a room that you've cleared previously, it'll add new monsters into it.
Something like that,
fuck's
yeah.
sake,
So
really?
it's got like a randomized random element to it. So it's kind of a dice roll thing and it's not necessarily just rooms you've been in before. Like it'll be random corridors that you're going down for the first time. And like the way it manifests is it could be an enemy encounter might pop up, or it might be like in some sections like all the lights will just go out and you have to use your torch. And like in other places, just like steam will hiss out at random places and it'll be different on each playthrough. And I like this because this is everything that like people seem to like about roguelites, but without all the bullshit that I hate about roguelites.
It does seem really cool, but I don't know if I don't know. That's kind of like now I'm just always going to be on my toes, like, you know, which I don't know. Maybe that's kind of cool, but I'll have to wait until I play it and see. I
Man,
think.
you're after buying a ticket for a survival horror roller coaster. You can't get off halfway through when you're in the middle of the loop-de-loop.
Yeah, but when you're in when you're coming into a new area and you don't know what's around the corner and you're like, okay, right, I got to clear this section to get to that thing to solve this puzzle. And then, so I clear the section, get the thing, solve the puzzle, go back into the room I was just in, I'm fucked, like straight away. Because,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, give me a chance.
You'd have to wonder how it works with resource management as well, because obviously
Yeah.
if they know how many monsters you're going to fight throughout play and they start to introduce random ones, how's your ammo going to do? How's
Yeah.
your health going to do?
They must have that like in mind. Like they'd have to. Like there's no
Extra
way they could just
pickups.
keep hurling stuff at you if they know that you're going to be running out.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as you said, like Sean, like the Callisto Protocol kind of negates it a little bit for me because if I'm going to go for one, I'm going to go for the Callisto Protocol over this. Like just because
Yeah.
it's a new thing, and like even though I really liked the original Dead Space, it was my favorite out of the entire trilogy. I don't really think it merits a remake. Like,
Nah,
so,
it doesn't. Nah, I'm with
like
you
this
there.
is one of those games that if I pick it up, it'll be when it's like on special offer months and months down the line.
Yeah, I think so too.
On that point, just before we get to the central question of this, is there any game that you would love to see remade that doesn't seem to be getting anything? Sean's zinging over here. He's got an answer straight away. But is there anything in your heart of hearts that you think could really benefit?
No, okay.
What's with the pause? I thought you were.
I was letting Sean speak. He clearly wanted to go first.
I was just thinking I was going to say The Getaway, but actually I'd rather just see a new game in that series. It doesn't need a remake. But yeah,
that is a game that the technology held it back in some ways, because in some ways it was like an amazing accomplishment they did. You mentioned the ear graphics, amazing. But in some ways it looks really ugly now as well.
Yeah, true. For the time though, I think it was good. But yeah, no, actually, sorry, I rescind my remake comment on that.
We'll strike it from the ledger.
Let me have a think. Steve, over to you.
For me, jumping right back to the PS1 game that I've been clamoring for ages, the Legacy of Kain series, that needs a remake, because like that, even in the PS1 era, that was already suffering a little bit. Like I don't know if you guys know, but the original Soul Reaver, like its funding basically ran out before they could finish the game. So like it stops really abruptly at the end, and just like, it's like, here's the final boss, end credits. You know, it's literally that. Like, and the thing is, like, there's like 5 games in that series, all like that tell one story, and they could bring that down to a neat trilogy, and it would just be. Oh, I would love it. Amazing story that, like, and the gameplay just has not aged well, but the story is actually I'm going to correct myself here. The lore of that game is incredible, but the story itself suffers, and that's why they could improve on it. They could tell that story way better than they actually did in like that time.
That's an interesting point for remakes of games that were successful in some ways, but could use the extra resources or technology to really expand something. So like a lot of the games we're talking about are like classics. Like people think, you know, the original Silent Hill 2 and Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space are perfect games. Like they're high watermarks. And it's sort of like, could we not improve a game that was lacking in a certain area, or maybe ran out of budget or something like that? Yeah, that's.
How about you, Michael? What do you think should be remade?
I'd probably do like a safe answer in, say, Final Fantasy VI.
Oh yeah, that'd be good.
Because it's quite an old game. I think like 94 something it came out, some like early to mid 90s anyway. And seeing that expanded with the same treatment as the Final Fantasy VII remake would be insane. Or Final Fantasy IX, like any of the PS1 era ones would be amazing, to be honest.
You've actually just reminded me of something that I really wanted to ask you specifically. Now, when you say a Final Fantasy VI remake, would you want that kind of remake, like with the full 3D, or do you know Octopath Traveler? If they had like that kind of 2.5 graphics, like that would be, because they did that with that other game, Live Alive or Live Alive, however way you're supposed to pronounce that. Like they did a remake of that basically with those graphics, and it looks incredible. And I was like, if they did that with Final Fantasy VI, I would be all over that. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, that would be good, but I guess it touches on the necessity of it as well, because like, is it different enough? It would be like a great definite edition of the original if they didn't change anything. They just updated those graphics to have like that Octopath Traveler style and that sort of sheen on it. But part of me wants to see how they would adapt it into fully 3D voice acted sort of Final Fantasy remake mode. But yeah, it would probably be something from that era.
Did you ever see the PS1 CG movie they did, like, to complement the main game?
Yeah,
like would it be like that kind of thing, or
yeah, sort of in that style to a certain extent. I don't know, some more adaptation, and obviously like, I don't know what they do gameplay wise. I'd love if they kept it turn based, but would probably do like an active battle thing like they do in Final Fantasy VII remake. But yeah, along those sort of lines, I would say. Cool. Sean,
I was just thinking, well, this has already been announced, but the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes, I can't wait for those. Because like I think like the originals are still like really good and you can easily play them. But playing Max Payne 3, which I think like Rockstar did an amazing job on the graphics and the gameplay in that game, that I would love to play 1 and 2 in that kind of engine, even though it's not going to be in that engine because it's being made by Remedy. It's
in a similar style.
In a similar style, yeah. So I am looking forward to those a lot, actually.
Yeah. Again, Max Payne 1 is almost like Silent Hill 2 to me, in that the limitations of the aesthetic work for me because it has that grimy, minimal sort of feel. But yeah, the the main image I remember from Max Payne 1 is his face, that weird sort of
Sam Lake.
scrunchy looking character model face they have
Yeah.
when he's firing the gun. But yeah, that would be that.
Those
is
would
one
be cool, I think. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to.
Just popped into my head, but I'd actually love to see Black remade, like just updated. Because that's a game that's kind of almost lost to time, really. Like where they only made one, and then the studios like got not shut down, but they got kind of moved off making a sequel. And I'd love to see something like, I think in like with the resurgence of Doom and stuff like that, that could do actually pretty well if they just updated it graphically and stuff. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah,
Definitely, yeah. So we've discussed all these remakes, but the central thesis, the main point of us all getting together and talking is to see which of these two games, being Silent Hill 2 and Resident Evil 4, would benefit most from a remake, and also which game looks likely to be better for being remade. So on paper, they might seem like, oh yes, that would be perfect to be remade, but which approach do we feel is better as well?
I think, I can't really speak on Silent Hill 2 too much, but I think like we said, Resident Evil 4 is going to sell like hotcakes. So I think that's going to benefit really heavily. I guess, like you guys were saying, Silent Hill 2 will really depend on how Bluebird team like approaches it and stuff.
That name.
Yeah.
Great.
But which will benefit more? Probably Silent Hill, I guess, just because it's the older game. And like, what was the question again? I keep getting mixed up with the two questions you're saying.
So which would benefit most from a remake? Like which needed to be remade more, but also which approach that they're taking do we think is better?
Oh, well, we don't fully know really the approach of Silent Hill 2, I guess.
Okay, fuck me then.
I don't really think 4 needed the remake, so that's my answer for that one. But I think 4 will sell like hotcakes. There we go. Okay. Over to you, Steve.
Okay. Anyway, so
oh, sorry.
I'm messing. I definitely think like Silent Hill 2 needed the I mean, I say needed. Silent Hill 2 was more likely to benefit out of the two of these. Like it definitely had more to gain than Resident Evil 2 did, because as like Resident Evil 4 did, because Resident Evil 4 has been like released, re-released and re-released on multiple occasions. It's on like the Wii, it was on like PlayStation, it was on PlayStation 4, I think it was on PlayStation 3 as well. And it's on like, it's in VR, like, so clearly it's a game with lots of replay value despite the fact that it's like pretty old. Silent Hill 2, other than the HD collection, which didn't do great, has not seen a re-release since then. So just for the sake of being made playable again, I think that definitely would benefit. I also think that while I do agree with Sean that Resident Evil 4 is going to make the most money, I do still think that Silent Hill 2 stands more to benefit than Resident Evil 4. I think Resident Evil 4 will, at best, make a very playable, passable game that's going to be, it's going to be lost like to time shortly after it's made. I don't think anyone's going to be talking about it a year later. But Silent Hill 2, the remake, I think that's something that even if it doesn't do well, it'll make its mark. So, I'm going to say Silent Hill 2 on that.
Yeah, that's a good point on them. And I guess it comes down to how they interpret the themes and story and all that sort of, more subversive stuff in Silent Hill 2, because that's a trickier thing to get right. It's not as easy as just like putting some nicer graphics on it. I say that like it's an easy thing to update graphics. I know nothing about that, but it's also worth noting as well, Steve touched on like how difficult it is to play the original Silent Hill 2. And one benefit of remakes is there are some games that are just lost. As in, one thing that happened, especially in the 90s and early 90s, is that the source code for games was just destroyed. For like, I think I may be wrong, but I think that's what happened in the case of the original Silent Hill 2. Like, there's
Oh, really?
no version of that still exists, and
that's why the HD version was like so shit. Like, and all the fog effects were bad. Like, basically, that the version they got wasn't the complete version. It was just a version on someone's computer, so they just had to like wing a lot of it, and it's why it's not. Now, I played the PlayStation version of that apparently, which was a lot better than the Xbox 360 one, and I didn't hate it. But they made some weird. The voice acting in that one is so bad.
And there's also some of the text on the signs. They changed the font to Comic Sans for some strange reason.
Why?
But also, like, there's stuff like older voice recordings not being done at a fidelity that like translates to updated, like, sharper graphics. You know, like, there's no button to make the voice sound better. They can do a little bit, but if you're recording on some fucking gramophone back in the day, there's only so much you can do to make it sound modern.
Yeah.
So yeah, all that being said, I sort of agree with both of you. I think Silent Hill 2 was the game that could have most benefited from being remade with proper care. But I sort of prefer the approach of the RE4 remake in some ways. They're just expanding it in certain sections. You know, they seem to be introducing a creepier atmosphere. But like, from what I can see, they seem to have a good handle on what made the original good. And it's also been developed by a team with a pretty good track record. Like, the RE2 remake got like some really good reviews and people love that game. And it stands as something separate to the original Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
Bloober team, less so, but I guess, you know, we have to give them a chance and see how they do.
I just wanted to mention this as well. Like, can we pour one out for the team that was making the Resident Evil HD project? Because I think they only like just got that finished, or maybe they're like almost finished it. I'm not sure where it stands, but that's been in the making for like 10 years or something.
The level of detail they went into was crazy. So for those who don't know, it's a new texture mod for Resident Evil 4 to update everything and make it sharper and HD. And they went to such extremes to get everything right that they actually went to the real world locations where the original Capcom devs took reference photos and took HD reference photos of the same architecture and used them as textures within the game.
Insane.
So like, that level of detail is amazing. I feel for them, but I also feel like that can exist as well as
100%.
The remake of Resident Evil 4 for people who want the original experience, but just with like gussied up graphics, without any of these new sections or mechanics or anything like that. I think that will work for them.
Yeah, totally. Because like, that was always going to be. It was never going to be like a commercial release thing anyway. It was always going to be like a modders project, you know, where you download the mod and patch it on your PC version or whatever. So like, the new remake is more for the general audience.
Yeah, that's for the diehards. So that's it in terms of remakes. Thanks very much for listening, guys. I don't think there's any other thing at all that any of us want to talk about.
I need to talk about Silent Hill.
We already just had a massive segment on Silent Hill, Steve. Are you on?
Yeah, weren't you listening?
Calm yourselves, lads. Calm down. Everyone calm down. I need to talk about this. I don't care. I know what the question was, but I need to talk about the other stuff that was announced during the Silent Hill transmission. So, did you guys see this stuff when it came out?
No.
I
did hear about them afterwards. Yeah, I didn't watch it live. But
what is Silent Hill?
I am according to my Bebo profile, I am Silent Hill. Okay, so we're not going to spend too much time on this, but I just want to have a quick rundown of all the other Silent Hill projects that got announced, and you can probably already tell that I'm a lot more excited for this stuff than I am for the remake. So there were 2 other mainline games announced, another movie, and a very weird project that I'll talk about later that no one seems to know what it is exactly.
Okay.
The first other game that was released. Excitement, Sean. Excitement.
Calm yourself.
So there was a trailer released for a game called Silent Hill Townfall. And in my head, Townfall. It's a weird name. It's being produced by Annapurna Studios, and generally I like the stuff that they do. So I was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm down for that. They haven't really shown anything in the trailer. Like basically all you see is there's a radio on like someone's desk and someone's talking about and saying stuff like, oh, you did something terrible, is that why you're here? Oh, I think you're going to suffer here, you know, kind of like outline of how Silent Hill games go, basically.
Yeah,
so it's
Silent Hill, yeah.
It's telling you nothing, and they show you on the radio. There's a little screen, and they show you a few like very basic like staticky images. You can see like a monster at one point, and like a rusty looking corridor. Again, standard stuff. At the very end, you see this guy's face like briefly for a second, and a lot of people think he might be the main character or something like that. Some people are thinking he looks a bit like there was a postman in the Downpour game, and he was like this weird random character. Some people think he looks a bit like him. I don't buy it personally. I mean, you could say because Downpour, Townfall, they sound kind of similar, but personally, I don't think that's the case. We don't really know anything about this game, but it's done by the creators of Stories Untold and Observation. Haven't played either of those games, unfortunately, but they both got really good reviews. Like, people seem to like them. And they do have this thing that every now and then they'll cut to like a beach and just show like waves like going up and down. And it looks really aesthetically like amazing. So don't really know anything about it. I can't really get excited, like even though I am, but I can't justify my excitement, but I have a good feeling about it. I think it'll be good,
cool.
And I'm really looking forward to more info on it. So you guys didn't see that at all, no?
No, I did see that trailer. Yeah, like you were saying, it's sort of, there's not a lot you can glean from it, but like the track record of the people involved and the presentation did look good. So yeah, not too much to latch onto, but yeah, quietly excited, I would say. But I think there's a lot more interest around F or whatever it's called.
That's it. So Silent Hill F is a really unusual concept. So basically it's a Silent Hill game that takes place in 1960s Japan, which is really, really strange. Simply because, you know, it's called Silent Hill. Now, people have argued this before, saying like, how can you have a Silent Hill game that isn't set in Silent Hill? But they pretty much did that with Silent Hill 4. So like, it is doable. I have mixed feelings about this one. Like, I kind of love certain parts of it. So for those who don't know, the trailer basically it shows like a girl wandering through like these deserted streets in like some tiny little Japanese town. And she looks not very happy or well. And it just shows a lot of general Japanese iconography, but then you start seeing like fungus growing out of the walls and kind of trying to grab her and stuff. And it ends with her kind of in the middle of a little small lake or something in front of what do we call it? A Jinja Gate, a shrine gate. And she's just covered in flowers, looks a lot like the girl from Midsummer by the end of it. And then my favorite moment of the whole thing, you just see a tear fall from her face, and then her entire face just peels off and falls to the ground, and it's just like a hole where her face should be. Again, mixed feelings about this. I kind of got strong The Last of Us vibes for certain parts of it, because it's like, you know, fungus, and I'm like, this is a bit weird. And also being set in Japan, there's a lot of like similarities between this and the likes of like the Fatal Frame series or the Fatal Frame series. But so I'm kind of like, why are they doing this in Japan? I mean, but at the same time, there's parts of it I like. I love that imagery at the end. The theme music, which uses like Japanese flutes at the end, is so good, so chilling, and I love that. I don't know your man Ryu Hashi 7, whatever his name was. I have no idea who he is, so I can't really say anything about him. But
from what I've read, he's a horror story author, and this is the first video game they'll be. I saying he. I actually don't know. What
it is a he. It is a he. Yeah.
But yeah, and they're got good reputation for creepy stories, apparently. So that's something in its favor, I guess.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Whereas like Townfall, I don't really know anything about, and for that reason, I'm kind of like, ooh, it could be anything. This is teasing a little bit more, and I feel more excitement than trepidation, if I'm being honest. Like, I think it'll be good, but I'll just have to see more. I'll need to see gameplay before I can really put a stamp on it. But it's
Yeah.
exciting anyway. And just very briefly to talk about the other two things, which are weird to say the least. So the first one is Return to Silent Hill, which is Christopher Gans, who directed the original Silent Hill movie. He's coming back to do the third one. He didn't do the second one, which was an absolute train wreck and absolutely hilarious. But yeah, he's coming back to do this one. People are like saying, oh, great, it's a real return for form. I listened to the interview and it sounded so robotic. I think he's going to fuck this up so badly. He's saying like he's taken inspiration from like Silent Hill 2. He's like, oh, I'm going to like basically retell Silent Hill 2. And to me, that just screams that the man has absolutely no passion or vision. He's just kind of saying, oh, I'm just going to remake the game. Like, so he's you know, what's his name? Was it W.S. Anderson? Is that the name of the guy who does, or what's the name of the Resident Evil guy?
Paul Thomas Anderson, yeah. Oh, wait, no. Am I mixing him up with the guy who directed There Will Be Blood? Both of them are called Paul Anderson. But yeah, one of those guys anyway.
It kind of strikes me like that kind of thing. And like, you know, again, going for Silent Hill 2 just screams to me like, you know, cash grab. We know people like this game, so obviously let's do that. So that's going to be bogus and bullshit, basically. Okay. But the last thing that I want to talk about now is this weird Silent Hill, what was it called? I forget the name of it. Shit, I probably should have prepared this now.
Ascension?
But basically, yes, thank you, Ascension. So the easiest parallel I can describe here is those weird interactive movies or like TV specials that Netflix do, where like you can choose the way the characters go.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That seems to be what they're doing, but nobody seems to really know for certain. I've seen some people on the website saying that this is going to occur once, and that'll be it. Once it's done, you can never play it again, which seems really fucking dumb, if I'm being honest. like, I'm excited about it. I'm going to take part, but it just seems really stupid. It seems like a really dumb Konami decision to make. Like, but they're making it. So yeah, and also there was an interview, if you check it out, right, there's an interview with the guy who's kind of like heading up the technology, and he looks absolutely dead behind the eyes, completely monotone, and he's saying stuff like, this is spearheading new technology and we're really excited about it. And I'm like, dude, try a little bit of excitement, like, man, try and sell it a little bit.
Leave him alone. Maybe he didn't have his coffee that morning, okay? We're all human. We can't all get excited about Silent Hill Ascension. But yeah, that one, like, the weird thing about all these is there's so many question marks about everything they announced, really.
Yeah.
There's nothing definite, but it's crazy that there's zero Silent Hill for 10 years apart from pachinko machines, and then you get like 5 different multimedia projects at once.
Honestly, man, I don't even care. I almost don't even care if they're bad. I'm just glad that I have something to cling to again. Like, I have something to really look forward to. So
Yeah.
it was Christmas for me when that happened. I was so happy. 3 Silent Hill games like to look forward to. Hell yes, I am over the moon.
And for those of you who enjoyed our Silent Hill series, we probably will be revisiting these games once they're released and once once Steve has had time to delve into them and see how potentially crappy they are, or if there's any bright spots.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But just before we finish up, do you guys have anything that like any comments you have on the Silent Hill stuff? Like, nah.
Yeah, because you sort of steamrolled us there, Steve, in Silent Resident Hill.
It's almost like I like it. Yeah.
Like I was saying, it's so surprising that they came out with so much stuff. Like the Silent Hill 2 remake had been rumored for a while, so like we sort of saw that coming in some ways. But I'm interested, especially coming from Konami, who had been so anti-games for so long, to announce 3 different ones, which, you know, we've talked about some question marks around them, but they all have a lot of potential. And to give, like, especially with the Project F or whatever you call it, it seems to have a lot of creative freedom there. Like, taking out of America could be like a shot in the arm that the series needs. Probably won't rely as much on the old iconography. I'd be very surprised if Pyramid Head showed up in that game. But yeah, still, we need to see more, really.
I think it's cool that Konami is like, they just came out with like a shitload of new Silent Hill stuff when it's been so long.
It means maybe we could get a Metal Gear Solid remake
Yeah.
/ a new game. I would love for someone else to try make a story-led Metal Gear game in the vein of the original ones, to be honest.
How would you feel though about somebody making it who's not Kojima?
I would love that.
Yeah.
I would love to see what they do, because he's so tied up in it that it's amazing, and you can see his imprint, but it became detrimental as the series went on. So it'd be amazing to see someone taking, okay, 5 had amazing gameplay. Where can we improve it? What can we say with this game? If someone had that approach, I would love to see it.
Wasn't Metal Gear...
Survive.
Yeah, wasn't that not him?
That's not him, yeah. But that was just like Metal Gear bolted onto a live service game.
Yeah, I
really.
guess
like
so.
it was pretty soulless. You're defenders of that game, and you can enjoy it, guys. I'm not going to hold it against you, but
You're wrong.
you're wrong. Your opinion is wrong.
You are wrong.
But I would love to see another creative voice in that universe, really.
Yeah. No, that's pretty much it. I just think it's really cool that they're bringing back that series, and it obviously has a lot of fans that have been waiting for something new for a long time. So yeah,
Throw him a bone, guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
A bone
like
covered with blood and viscera.
Only in your head, though. No, I do like just the very last thing that I will say about, like, I do like the fact that they got the 3 games, but like it's not just like 3 AAA games or whatever. Like they do seem to be taking a different approach. Like you've got the remake, which is obviously the cash grab, but like they do seem to be also taking it seriously, like a reasonably well-renowned studio. So like, yay, happy days. Then like the Stories Untold and the Observation, they seem to be kind of taking a chance because they're better known for like smaller kind of indie titles. So I think that's why I'm probably the most excited about that, because that looks like it's going to be a little bit off the wall. And then finally you have like something that's a bit more closer to home, like again, like literally bringing it back to Japan, and like that's yeah, that'll be also a bit wild, but like they've still got their safe cash grab, so they can afford to be wild with that one, which again bodes well. So happy days.
Yeah, lots to look forward to. I'm sure we'll be touching on them again in the future at some point. And yeah, I'm looking forward to editing 10 hours of blood and guts for Steve's analysis video. That'll probably be coming for some of these down the line.
Yay.
But on that note, thanks for listening, guys. We will be back with more From the Top podcasts very soon. We're just about to round out the top 10 in the Metacritic list, so you can see what makes the top 10. Spoiler, it's another Rockstar game. But there will be more variation coming in that soon. And we have more videos coming very soon as well to the main channel. So that's the Cardboard Box Item on YouTube. So you'll see that. So if you want the Cardboard Box Item podcasts, search for us on Spotify or anything else that you may listen to podcasts on. And if you want From the Top, which is our Metacritic countdown list, you look for From the Top. And it's as simple as that, guys. It's not complicated. Get with the program. There's 2 different names. We get it, okay?
And if you don't listen to our podcast, we are not going to be friends.
Yeah. You can rescind our invitation to your birthday party.
Take that.
Cool.
Okay, bye-bye.
That's it. Good luck, lads.
Muy.